Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's Thursday with AARP Wisconsin show. I am Amber Miller, your hostess, and also an AARP staff member. So today we have a very exciting show, and if you are in the state of Wisconsin viewing this, my assumption is you're having probably some very pleasant weather. So we're going to be talking all about what this month means for you to get outside. As always, if you have any questions, if you're looking for upcoming events or have questions about the vaccine or advocacy, please visit the AARP Wisconsin webpage, which is below at aarp.org/WI. And we are also still looking for some fabulous volunteers to join us here at AARP Wisconsin. If you have a passion to help with advocacy, outreach, networking, facilitating, speaking, we probably have a very great opportunity for you coming up. So you can find all the information below at aarp.org and then /I want to volunteer. We also still have the Friendly Voice initiative, which started last year, and it is free. You could be any age. You do not need to be an AARP member, but if you're looking for a friendly voice on the other end, you could put a request in for a weekly, daily, monthly call. You could do it for yourself, or you could place it on behalf of a loved one. And all that information is below at the website or the phone number below. Should you have any questions, you can call 1-888-281-0145. So for the month of June, celebrate the natural wonder and outdoor spirit of America by getting outdoors during Great Outdoors Month. So our guest today will be talking about the combined efforts of AARP and also 880 Cities, which is a booklet that came out all about creating parks and public spaces for people of all ages, and it's actually a step-by-step guide. And this really coincides with the AARP Livable Communities initiative, which you can also find additional information on below, or you can also go to the aarp.org website and type in Livable Communities in the upper right-hand corner. It'll give you some additional information. So our guest today, she's coming to us from Toronto. So Amanda O'Rourke is the executive director of 880 Cities, and for over the past 13 years, she has driven the successful growth of international nonprofit through strategic planning, partnership development, and team building. Amanda has led diverse, innovative public space projects in cities and towns all across North America, Europe, and Australia. She enjoys working She enjoys working with city governments and community partners to make it easier for people to walk, bike, take transit, and also build connections and sense of belonging in parks and public spaces. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Amber.
Absolutely. And if you are watching this show live, we will be taking questions throughout the broadcast. So if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can post them, and we will get Amanda to answer those throughout the show. So Amanda, I just want to turn it right over to you because I know you have a really great presentation and slides that you want to share to talk all about this collaborative effort between AARP and also 880 Cities.
Perfect. So I am going to start my presentation. Thanks so much, Amber, for that very warm introduction. So hi, everyone. My name is Amanda O'Rourke. I'm the Executive Director of 880 Cities, as Amber mentioned. And I am super excited to be here to talk about getting outside and parks and public spaces. These are one of two of my favorite passions, especially I'm a really big winter person, and I know you all get winter just like we do here in Canada, so excited to talk about these topics today. So if you don't know who 880 Cities is, we're a nonprofit organization. We're based in Toronto, Canada, which is the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of Credit, and now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And our mission at 880 Cities is to improve the quality of life for people living in cities, no matter their age, ability, or socioeconomic status. And when we say cities, we mean communities, rural places, any places where people are. We achieve our mission by actually bringing people together to transform mobility and public space, because we believe these are really critical pieces of creating more equitable, more sustainable, and more vibrant community places. Over the last 15 years, we've worked in around 350 different cities on 5 continents, really kind of challenging cities on the way they design, plan, and manage their streets and public spaces. And we do this by asking a really simple, but we think powerful question. And that is, what if everything we did in our cities was great for an 8-year-old and an 8-year-old? We think if you start there with that question, you can get to a place where you create better communities that work for everyone. So I'm really excited to talk to you all today about not just 880 Cities, but this collaboration with AARP, which we've been working with this wonderful organization for the last 4 years, actually. But at 880 Cities, our work really centers around kind of reclaiming the right to the city for everyone. It's about, reclaiming the right to move safely and comfortably in our cities by walking and cycling, by being able to participate fully in city building in our communities, and of course, the right to public space, which is through the design, programming, and management of public space, that everyone has the right to great public spaces in their communities. We were founded by Guillermo Peñalosa, who started his city building career in Bogota, Colombia in the late 1990s. He's now the chair of our board, and Gil, along with many others in the 1990s, led a really impressive transformation of that city by investing in parks, in public transit, in safe, all ages, all abilities bikeways, and in the ciclovia, which is the bottom right picture. Ciclovia, if you haven't heard of it, is car-free Sundays. So every Sunday, the city opens up kilometers and kilometers of streets to people to be physically active, to connect with one another. It's a program that's now been widely emulated around the world. But the reason I talk about Gil and Bogota is that the inspiration for creating 880 Cities was based on this experience and is still baked into kind of the DNA of the organization and how we work. This idea that public space transformation can be a driver for achieving social equity and quality of life outcomes. So this is still what drives us to this day. And as Amber mentioned, we had the wonderful opportunity, I think it was 3 years ago now, that we collaborated with AARP as well as the Trust for Public Land to create this guide, a step-by-step guide to creating parks and public spaces for people of all ages. We know that parks are so important, but how important is this? I imagine my audience knows a lot about the benefits of parks, but I always still love to talk about the benefits at the start of any presentation I'm doing about parks, because parks are often the first thing on the chopping block when city budgets are being cut. And so it's so important that we talk about the benefits, and we know the benefits because it's so much more than just fun and games. There are so many benefits to having great parks and public spaces, including improving our physical health, our mental health. They clean our air and water. They provide opportunities for enhancing community connections. And of course, they add economic value and save money by reducing healthcare costs and reducing stormwater runoff. There's so many benefits of parks. So while this slide may be really obvious, and a lot of people know that parks are great and important, I always love to start with that because it's so often that we do not invest in our parks the way that we could to ensure great quality and great benefits in our communities. I added this slide here today to not only talk about those broad benefits, but amidst this global disruptive pandemic, we've also seen a newer appreciation for our parks and public spaces. And this is clearly demonstrated in the data. This is Google data, and this is for the US. So you can see people have flocked to our parks like never before amidst this pandemic. So I think that there is a new appreciation for the essential services and essential great benefits that parks provide for our communities. On the other side, though, we also know that the pandemic has exacerbated or highlighted inequality, and millions of Americans lack access to quality parks. This is a report issued by the Trust for Public Land, one of our partners on the Parks Guide. And we know that low-income households and people of color in cities are least likely to live near decent green spaces. So not everyone is feeling these benefits equally. So it's ever more important that we think about how we create parks and public spaces that really work for everyone. When we embarked on this project with AARP, we looked at some of the research, and interestingly, we know there was a great study by Rand Corporation that showed that while older adults account for 20% of the general population in the US, they make up only 4% of total park users. And this was done in some of the larger cities in the US. And we know that's not because older adults don't want to go to parks, it's because our parks aren't really doing all they can to make them inviting and accessible for people of all ages. So the whole inspiration for creating this Parks Guide was building also off of this campaign championed by the Trust for Public Land as well, is that every person should have a fantastic park or public space within a 10-minute walk of where they live. And this has, really been even more highlighted amidst the pandemic, the need for everyone to be able to have a great place for them to connect with nature, feel connected to the outside, be socially connected to their community, but while also being physically distant and safe amidst a pandemic. So this is the kind of guiding goal of that we organized ourselves for this project, this guide. And it made me think, as we were thinking of that fantastic word for parks and public spaces, this is a really important qualitative word to include there, because while a lot of places have parks, not all of them are fantastic parks. So I always like to emphasize the fantastic park. This is a park, a new park in the city where I'm from, in the city of Toronto. And I always use this to show, like, we can do a lot better with our park spaces. This is like newly built. And my kids, I have 3 kids, they might spend 5 minutes at this park and get immediately bored. So how can we actually create parks and public spaces that invite people to be totally connected to their environment and to their community and to play out in public more? And that was, again, what guided us for this step-by-step guide with AARP. The guide is available freely for download on the website, and it's organized around these kind of 3 key themes. One is around kind of improving existing parks. The second is connecting people to parks. And then the third is creating new parks. And we designed it this way because we know that not every community is the same. You might be in a community where you have lots of park land, but you want to improve the existing spaces. You might
Amanda?
be. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one question coming through. If I could read that to you. So we have a question from Jim, and it says, Amanda, what can communities do to generate interest and boost public support for park improvements instead of just approving projects in committee and pay for them with tax dollars? I think he meant communities, but if you have any insight.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. I think, the key to kind of unlocking this parks are something that everyone, I think, really appreciates in communities. They're not always advocating. And I think in terms of our experience in working in parks and parks advocacy, one of the things that we've done to actually encourage more advocacy, and I think what actually accelerates advocacy for parks and investment, which then leads to investment, is actually getting community members engaged directly in their park with programs and activities, and actually providing opportunities for people to demonstrate like leadership in their community with their parks. I actually have a few slides. One of the key aspects that we highlight in the guide is about engagement and energizing. So I'm going to provide a few examples of that as well, but it's a really excellent question. In my experience, I think, getting people more involved and feeling a sense of stewardship of the space, whether it's something as simple as, litter cleanup days to actually being involved in a park like design process. The more that people are involved, I think the more that they tend to advocate to elected officials for more investment and better investment.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So as I was saying, in the guide, there's kind of these three areas, and we designed it this way because we know every kind of community might have different challenges or opportunities with their parks. Some may need to kind of improve existing parkland. Maybe there's more, they have a lot of great parkland, but it's the access and connection to the parks is the challenge, especially walking and biking and transit access. And then the third is, maybe you are in an area where it's park deficient. So how do we actually create new parks and, kind of thinking outside the box and thinking about creating new parks in unconventional spaces. So I'm going to quickly go through in the rest of my presentation these kind of three areas, but I do encourage you to take a look at the guide, which has not only these kind of like principles, but it has some really great case studies and examples of communities and good practices in this area. So the first one is around improving existing parks. So maybe you have a lot of great park space, but maybe there's not a lot to do there, or maybe the design's not so great, or maybe there's a need for more engagement with the community. So we've the three kind of subcategories is first one is provide activities. We've worked with so many different cities, as I mentioned, and we're always surprised at how many times we've gone to parks and public spaces where there's really not that much to do in the park. It looks beautiful, maybe the design is gorgeous, but what can you really do there? And that's really a key indicator for creating a park and public space that really works for all ages and all abilities. So our recommendation is always, to provide activities, not just thinking about all ages, but thinking about all kinds, all throughout the year. We have 4 seasons here in Toronto. I know you all do in Wisconsin as well. So how do we actually think about using our parks, these amazing public space assets, not just for the 3 or 4 beautiful months of the year, but all year round. So being creative in our approach, and then also thinking about it at different times of the day. So you'll have different people using the park in the early morning versus evening versus after school. Essentially, one of the founder of 880 Cities has this great quote, is that cities often can find the millions for investment in parks, for the capital investment, but they don't actually find the thousands of dollars to make them work, which is really about how do you actually find those dollars for maintaining and managing the park in a way that actually gets people out and being physically active and socially connected. So great public space management goes well beyond just picking up the leaves and mowing the grass. It's really about thinking about all the different activities, as I mentioned before, in winter, in summer, yoga, tai chi, maybe it's a simple fire to roast marshmallows. It's after school programs for kids, different ages, different uses. actually spaces where you can come together as a community, whether it's movie nights in the summer or in the winter. This is in Tromsø, Norway. I think it's like minus 40 degrees here. And yes, why not have a movie night? Obviously, these pictures are pre-pandemic. And we actually have I have a few photos later on post-pandemic of some of the innovative things cities have been doing to create more public space for people. So that's the first one, providing activities. Design for all is kind of the second pillar under improving existing parks. This might seem really obvious, but it's amazing how few parks actually do design thinking about multiple ages and multiple abilities. Design for all is thinking really about safety and comfort. And if you take that 880 lens, we know that in parks, walking is the most common activity in parks. But a lot of parks don't even have a simple walking path. So if you want to encourage physical activity for a lot of different age groups, smooth walking surfaces that are cleared of snow and ice in the winter are a really great design asset if possible in parks. Walking is by far the #1 activity in parks. Counter to that also is having places for people to sit and rest that are comfortable. So here you see in this picture, they have this beautiful walking path, and it looks like they're about to put in some benches soon. But having that both are really important. I'm a mom of 3 kids, and I know that I'm not going to spend a lot of time in a park unless I have amenities like washrooms and drinking fountains. This is really important when thinking about designing for all ages. And then let's also think about multi-generational equipment and design features. So not just playgrounds, but maybe it's play for all ages, it's walking paths, it's fitness lots, community gardens. The list goes on. There's more included in the guide. But I did want to take a moment, because it's something I'm very passionate about, is to think about benches and seating. And seating is often something that sometimes is just kind of plunked in and the design is not totally thought of. But when you're thinking of all ages, you really want to think about the placement of seating. So yes, while this is a picture of Miami, while there's a great bench here and you have a great view of the ocean, it's in the full sun, there's not a lot of shade. The material might not be very comfortable to sit on. The good thing about this one is it has a back, so if you need back support, it does have that, but it doesn't actually have handles where you can lift yourself up and down. We know that that's in our research and focus group with older adults, having something to leverage and push yourself up and down from is really important. Here's another picture of seating. Here, this is in a Toronto park. While there's obviously some really big management and maintenance issues in this park, you can see me in the background. We were doing a observational study of this park. I think I counted more pigeons that day than people. But as you can see, while the seating is not very attractive by any means, it does have a back, it does have some of those handles. We worked on this park. The observational studies and the engagement informed the final design approach. And this is a picture of the park closer to present day, where they actually designed movable furniture, movable seats, which we think are really fantastic. It creates a lot more sociability in the park. You can move the chairs around and create groups like this. This is a lovely community partner from the YMCA who hosts her monthly book club in the park now, because they can sit around a table and enjoy the space. I also love that the seats have the handles and the backs. So these are like details that I always look at when I'm thinking about designing a great public space for all ages. On to my next passion is bathrooms, public washrooms. As I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in a park unless I know that there's a washroom. I have 3 kids, and yeah, if you're going to spend a lot of time in a park space, you need to have access to washrooms. And this is also something that we've heard consistently in our research and focus groups with older adults. Having facilities close by is one of the things that they look for. when they're going to visit a park space. This is a picture of a public washroom in Bryant Park in New York City. Obviously, I'm not advocating that all public washrooms look this fancy and beautiful, but I just think it's a great example of actually if we really thought about creating spaces that were designing for dignity and elevating the public spaces as these great places for people, I think this is a great aspirational example. When we think of design, we also have heard and listened to many folks say that, we also want to have actual active spaces in our parks. I've talked to many older adults who say, Amanda, sure, we need benches, but just sitting on a park bench is pretty boring and looking at the garden. We also want to be really active. This is one of the healthiest generations. So having opportunities for all ages to be physically active in park, whether it's through equipment, and why not create spaces where all ages are actually being able to be physically active together. I love this picture. This is from Florida. So you have the fit lot, but you also have the playground for kids. I think this is a great opportunity to sort of create intergenerational connection. And playing is not just for young, it's for all ages. Why can't we create playful spaces that encourage everyone to be active in public space and have fun? I love this picture. This lady looks like she's having so much fun. This is in Copenhagen. And again, really thinking about designs that encourage not just sociability, but also people of all ages to be able to interact. This is a great fountain, I think, because it's great for little kids, but it's also great for dogs. So really thinking about design as flexible and adaptive. Okay, so the other kind of key piece that I wanted to talk about under improving existing parks is that engage and energize. So engaging people directly in their community, in helping design the actual hardware of the park, but also in terms of the software, like the programs, is really essential to creating spaces that people love. This is a great example in Richmond, California, the Elm Play Lot. So originally the city had kind of plunked in a cookie cutter playground, and the community was not super happy with that approach. It wasn't really meeting the needs of the local community. And through a very intentional engagement process with community, not only were they able to come up with a much more responsive design where the community helped actually build elements of the play lot. They also offered great programming elements like an after-school homework club, which were direct needs identified by the community. When we do engagement with cities and communities, we really try to push cities to think beyond the traditional approaches to engagement, which is usually a meeting at City Hall, or maybe it's even a meeting in the park. But how do we actually reach those underrepresented voices and community building, engaging with young people and with older people, going to where they are at, where they're comfortable, making it as easy as possible for them to provide their input, making it fun and engaging, and thinking outside the kind of conventional approaches, popping up in a parking lot to think about how we could reuse a parking lot space, going to an existing arts and culture an arts class in a community center with Latinx seniors, popping up in transit stations to ask how people want to get around, connecting with local community partners who know the community, who can have conversations with the community that outsiders like us would not be able to do. So engagement is a really important part of creating parks that work better for all ages and all users. So I talked about improving, if you remember that first slide, improving existing parks. Maybe you have great parks, but they're hard to get to. So connecting people to parks is also like the second kind of chapter in the guide. To put it really simply, it all comes down to putting pedestrians first, making it more walkable and inviting, and removing any barriers that might be around that makes it hard for people to access the park, whether they're walking or they're riding their bike or they're using a mobility device or they're taking public transit. We want our parks to be inviting and kind of fluid and connected to the whole public space network. Actually, streets are one of our largest public spaces in cities. So why don't we actually use the streets as an extension of our park spaces? So putting pedestrians first means kind of, this is a park, again, in Miami. It looks a bit more like a prison than a welcoming park. So it's really about creating an atmosphere of welcome in our park. And it can be not just physical barriers, but signage and infrastructure. This is a project highlighted in the guide that I just love. This was again done in collaboration with community in Philadelphia, where the community said, we'd love the park to feel like an extension of our front porch, and they installed these wonderful porch swings on the edges of the park, which created a sense of welcome. And welcome also is around sort of signals around who belongs and who can feel welcome in the space. This is a park in Toronto, and the gate. How can we actually create new parks in even unconventional spaces that maybe doesn't take a lot of money, but it takes a lot more creativity? So the two kind of ideas under this section are take back space and think outside the box. This is Reimagine as a park and public space. This is a street, as I mentioned, the Ciclovia at the outset in Bogota, Colombia, that's been widely emulated around the world, which is basically a giant pop-up park in the city. In Bogota, it's every Sunday. Kilometers of roadways are open to people as a giant pop-up park for social connection and recreation. We've kind of taken and adapted that approach here in Toronto by transforming one of the largest commercial streets in the city. We haven't got to every Sunday per year. We just have usually a couple of program dates per year, but reimagining it as a space for connection and physical activity and sense of health and well-being in the center of the city. Interestingly, that program, as with many other open streets programs, it's been adapted amidst the pandemic. So here in Toronto, the city has rolled out an active CO program amidst the pandemic, which is opening up kilometers of roadway for people to be physically active while physically distant amidst the pandemic. And that might be a legacy, a positive, maybe silver lining of the pandemic, actually creating more space for people in the city. So as I mentioned, here is kind of like a very quick recap of what's highlighted in the Parks Guide and the key areas that I mentioned. But you might be thinking, where do I begin? That was a lot of information, and there's probably even more information in the guide. But we actually have a very specific kind of toolkit included in the guide, where you as advocates, community members can work to have a better understanding of what your challenges and opportunities are in your community. As I mentioned, we do a lot of work in parks, and you can learn a lot by observing the public space of what's working and what's not. And this is, we do it in winter and in summer. We look at like how the park is actually performing, thinking about the people who are using it or people who are not using it and why that might be. So we've shared with everyone at AARP and anyone who downloads the guide some worksheets that you can use to help you identify maybe how the park is working, who's not there, and how to design and program thinking about people of all ages. We have some audit worksheets. We even have a programming calendar. Again, as I mentioned, cities tend to pour a lot of their programming dollars or invite a lot of programming in the summertime. We've been working a lot with winter cities on how do we actually extend that across the season. So it's not just a lot of activity packed into the summer, but it's thinking about it through all months of the year. There's also some really simple worksheets on asset mapping, like how do you actually identify stakeholders, the community members, and folks that need to be involved in these discussions early on. So my last, I think, 2 slides or 3 slides, a few slides, is really just hammering home that our approach at ADD Cities and with this collaboration with AARP and Trust for Public Land was really about taking an asset and equity-based approach, which is, inclusion and equity is baked into everything we do at ADD Cities. And you might be thinking, well, what does that really mean? And what it means is thinking about what's already working in your community. It's not kind of starting from scratch. There's a lot of really great assets, whether it's physical assets, but also community members and volunteers who are interested. And then also thinking about who isn't benefiting. So identifying the barriers and finding the folks who might not be usually involved in community building and thinking about targeted approaches to reach them. Essentially, it's about starting with people, engaging at all levels, listening to what people have to say to improve their public spaces, and taking action. One of the biggest mistakes people make is engaging community members and not taking quick action. And quick action can be something as simple as this was a project in outside of this city here in Ontario, where we literally spent $80 to bring some speakers outside so some of the programming could happen outside in public space. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, yes, you can paint the bench to promote volunteerism and stewardship in a public space. And ultimately, building those relationships with community members helps the community become more resilient. This is a great example. This is the last example, I promise, Amber, in Buffalo, where by engaging community members early on in park activations, amidst the pandemic, building off those relationships, the city was able to actually leverage those relationships and provide really essential services amidst the pandemic, like fresh food delivery and mask giveaways. So this is really ultimately about creating parks and public spaces that work for everyone, actually create a more resilient, inclusive community. The Parks and Public Spaces Guide, as I said, is available on aarp.org. We also have a Winter Cities Toolkit. ADD Cities recently launched. So if you're looking for winter inspirational ideas, there's lots of great ideas there. Also have my ADD Cities handles there. So if you want to reach out, feel free to do so.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amanda. We appreciate all your time today. And if you're watching this in replay, we will make sure to put the websites to the toolkit and the guide in the notes. But we appreciate all your time today and your passion to just create space for people of all ages. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up the show, there are some upcoming events that we would like to ensure that you know about. So June 8th, which is coming up, Livable Communities 101. So this will go really nicely with Amanda's presentation if you'd like to learn more about that. Coffee's Hot History, also on June 8th, Passport Walking Safely When You're 50 Plus, which is part of the AARP Wisconsin Passport to the Outdoors, which you can find on our website. June 15th is the AARP In Lacrosse Disrupt Aging Virtual Book Club. So make sure that if you're interested in any of those, you can register below or call the phone number. Also, Small Dollar Big Impact will be coming up, and it is due June 16th. This right here is for really fun and innovative ideas up to $1,000 that impact your community. And when you think about green space and pop-up parks and placemaking, all the stuff that Amanda talked about, this right here is something that you might be interested in. So once again, applications are due June 16th. You can find more information at the website below. For next week's show, we will have our advocacy team with us to talk about all about the emergency broadband benefit, that's difficult to say, also known as EBB. They're going to be talking about the program that came out and what it means for broadband in general. So you can meet us back here next Thursday at noon, either on our Facebook.com page or our YouTube page. Thank you, Amanda, so much for joining us. And thank you for joining us, whether it was live or replay. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Until then, be safe.